So you've probably seen a Clouser or two in your day. So in this video, I'm going to show you some things that you can do with the mighty Clouser. We'll tie a wide body and some flash tail features a la Dan Blanton. This is a classic color scheme for stripers and hybrids. Here we go. You guessed it, we're starting our thread again. What we want to do here is start at about the 1/3 point on the shank. Let's get nerdy here. If you like, you can measure the distance with a ruler so that all of your patterns are the same. Now enough of my nerd confessions. Let's form a bump here to support the eyes. So I've done eyes in at least 5 or 6 other videos, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Just use a variety of techniques to secure these down, and don't be afraid to crank down a bit with these coated eyes. Now enter into supersonic speed here so that we can quickly make a thread base. This is important for the overall durability of the fly. When you're done, you'll be just behind the point of the hook. Now bring in some white craft fur and latch it down. Then bring the thread up a bit. We're going to bring in some lateral line flash now. Put in about 10 to 12 strands and fold a little over about 1/3 of the length around the thread. Bring them up, give them a few wraps, and then adjust them so that the smaller pieces are directly over the longer pieces. Remember this because we'll do this with every piece of flash we use on this pattern. When you've done that, tighten it all down. We're going to do this again with some pearl Flashabou, but we're going to use about double as many fibers because they're cheaper and because they're not as flashy. Make sure once again that the pieces are lined up before you tighten them down. Okay, so here we're using some shorter pieces of cream craft fur. Tighten this piece down just like you did with the white piece before. These smaller pieces will kind of prop up our final white piece, as you'll see. Personally, I like flies that don't fall apart, so let's use our trusty Zap-A-Gap to lock everything in and protect our thread. Wrap through with your thread a few times and then wrap forward. Use some high-tech toilet paper, I trust you have some, to dry this thread faster. This probably looks familiar. Wrap in another piece of cream craft fur. Have the Zap-A-Gap ready to go because I put a lot of it on my flies. Let's dab some on and wrap a few times through it with the thread. Then use the TP to remove the excess so that we don't have to wait around for it to dry. Final piece of cream craft fur. And these two will prop up our last bit of craft fur to give it that nice wide body. Final bit of flash for the bottom part of the fly. Bring up some more lateral line, about 10 to 12 strands, and tie them in just like in the back. You can control how the flash lies on the fly. I like to pinch these fibers just a bit to widen them a tad. Then when you're all done, wrap up to right before the hook begins to bend. Create a nice thread base here too. Then position the thread so that you can tie in some white craft fur. Remember a loose wrap or two first, and then you can go to town. Cover the ends of the craft fur, whip finish the thread, and pull the craft fur towards the eye of the hook like so. We're going to attach some red thread now. It probably makes zero difference, but I like the look of it, so there. fluff the craft fur a bit and then bring it forward back over the eyes. Then we're going to make a few wraps over the craft fur. After a few wraps, I like to spread the craft fur a teeny bit to make it a little fatter. After you've done that, make a few more wraps with the thread and turn the fly over. Phase 2 of Operation Fat Shiny Clouser will commence now. I tie in 2 more clumps of flash now, starting with the same amount of lateral line as before. The longest side should extend to our eventual cut length, which in this case is about 5 to 5.5 inches. The reason I tie in at this position is to avoid bulk on the head. After you've got the flash situated, bring up another thick clump of pearl Flashabou in the same way. Give the fly a few wraps, adjust the smaller and longer sections, and then separate them equally with the hook point. I like to take my time here so that the amount of flash is on both sides of the hook point. When you've done this with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker, tie down the rest of the flash. Then tie off by hand or with a larger whip finishing tool. Now coat the red thread generously with Zap-A-Gap so that we can catch dozens of fish with one fly without the fly evaporating. Also add plenty of Zap-A-Gap on the fibers resting against the eyes. If the fly will be hitting rock, use epoxy or acrylic here. This particular fly is normally not hitting rocks though. Bring in the TP to dry things down. Now restart your original thread and position it towards the eye. Whenever I tie in craft fur at the head, I wet the tips just a little and cut them straight. The fibers will behave a lot better when you do this. Loose wraps and then tighten. Make sure to adjust the fibers before you wrap back completely. They should be right in the middle of the hook point. You can also adjust how wide or narrow the piece is. In this case, I want the fibers to spread out a bit more, so that's what I do. When everything looks good, lock it in. So here's the last bit of flash. I want this to be pretty flat so that it slips over to the sides just a bit. Also, a note on the flash. Many tyers, including Bob Clouser and Lefty Kreh, have pointed out that cutting flash at different lengths gives you flash points. So I think the lateral scale and the holographic Flashabou, which I'm using here, is really important. I usually use lateral scale and holographic Flashabou on most of my minnow patterns. Just finagle and coerce it into position like you have the last 2 bits of flash. Just 2 more pieces of craft fur. Place some chartreuse craft fur on, just like the white piece you just put on. You shouldn't have as much material though. A word of warning here, because it can really suck when you're wrapping the head. Keep the end of the craft fur just a bit away from the very end here, because the thread will at times slip onto the lip with the eye. Basically, your thread head disintegrates and slides everywhere. And keep this in mind as you're adding each section. If you ever need to, you can adjust your vise so that the fly is pointing upwards. Then at least you have gravity working for you. And I'm thinking of all this as I wrap over the exposed craft fur tips here. When everything looks tidy, add in the last piece of craft fur. I tie this in with the tips nowhere near the end of the thread so that it doesn't slip. But adjust the blue craft fur so that it covers the chartreuse craft fur and mutes this color a bit. When everything looks good, spend some time shaping the head. You could actually just tie off the fly immediately, but these colors bleed through the thread, so this is completely for aesthetic reasons. In other words, having a pretty fly. Let's whip finish this guy now. As expected, let's coat everything in Zap-A-Gap. This really adds a ton of durability to the fly. Again, add a little on the part between the eyes. After this, set this guy to the side to dry and cut the flash to length, in this case 5 to 5.5 inches. So this is what you'll end up with. You'll have a wide body and you'll have nice flash throughout the entire fly. But feel free to use this fly to tie your own creations in whatever colors you want. Feel free to subscribe if you like this, and thanks again.